Once there was a boy, not a big boy, and not a middle-sized boy, but a small boy. And every time his mother said to him, "You'll have to put away your toys now, dear. I'm sorry, but it's your bedtime." And he would drop his head and sigh and say, "Oh, gee, I wish I wasn't me." And when his father said, "No, son, you can't be a cowboy yet. You have to stay in school and study first." So he'd turn his back to his books and think to himself, "My, oh my, oh my, I wish I wasn't I." One sunny afternoon, as the small boy sat on his front doorstep with his chin in his hand, thinking how unhappy he was because he was him, he thought he heard a tiny voice laughing at him. The small boy looked straight up into the air, and then to the right of him, and then to the left of him, and then straight in front of him, and he saw no one. And then he heard the tiny voice again. This time it spoke.
"Oh, you look so funny with your chin hanging down. You look like a circus without any clown."
And then the small boy's eyes opened wide, and his mouth opened wider, for standing between his feet, laughing at him, most disrespectfully, of course, was a man. Not a big man, and not a middle-sized man, but a small man. Smaller by far than the boy. He was wearing a suit of green leaves with an acorn cup for a hat. The small boy closed his eyes and rubbed them and looked again. And then he just had to ask, "Are you really there?" Whereupon the little man in green stopped laughing and became angry. So angry that he hopped up and down, and he remarked to the world,
He says, "Am I here?"
and the boy said, "Are you there?" And Twink said,
"Oh, you said, am I here?"
and the boy, "Well, are you?"
"Yes!"
"Huh? Well, who are you and what do you do?"
"My name is Twink, Mister to you, and there's nothing in the world that I cannot do."
Nothing in the world he couldn't do? My, the small boy was impressed. So he leaned down close and whispered hopefully, "Mr. Twink, can you make me into something else besides a boy?" Whereupon Mr. Twink cocked his tiny head to one side and looked at the boy for a long time. And then he said,
I'll make you a chimney top or a pink frog, if you like. You might even be a Dutchman's dyke.
"Oh, I'd like to be a frog, Mr. Twink, or maybe a deer, or should I be a cottontail rabbit?"
Don't talk to me in maybes and shoulds. If that's what you want, let's go to the woods.
So off to the woods they went, the small boy and Mr. Twink. How nice it was in the cool trees. It was fresh and green and smelled like spring. Wild violets nodded to them from the grassy bed. And then listen, Mr. Twink. Listen. What is that?
Oh, my goodness. What a silly bumpkin you are, not to know the singing brook. Go on further. Let's have a closer look.
Oh, I'd like to be a brook, Mr. Twink. Will you please make me one?
A brook he wants to be. Well, consider it so. Step into the water and away you'll go.
Whee! I'm a brook! And what a happy brook he was, sliding and sliding through the green woods. That is, he was happy until he passed the one thing small boys can never resist, a wild cherry tree. He called out eagerly to Mr. Pink, who was hopping along beside him on the bank. "There's a wild cherry tree, Mr. Twink. May I please stop and pick some cherries?" But Mr. Twink wouldn't answer him. He just kept hopping along. And pretty soon the small boy, who was now a merry little brook, began to go faster and faster and faster. "Oh, Mr. Twink! Mr. Twink, stop me! Stop me! Stop me!" "Oh, whee! Oh, gee! Oh, boy!" But then the merry little brook that used to be a small boy went tumbling over a waterfall. "Oh, my! That was fun! Mr. Twink, Mr. Twink! I want to go back over the waterfall again. I want to play there every day." But all the time he was slipping and sliding and rushing away from everything that was behind him. And all that Mr. Twink would say was, "The brook keeps going on and on and on." "Well, boy, I can't stop. I can't stop and play. Mr. Twink, I don't think I want to be a brook."
You're right, Piccadilly. As I can plainly see, you'd rather be a boy. A brook you will not be.
"Oh, thank you, Twink, thank you. It's good to be on land again. But I'd still like to be someone else than me. And so they went deeper into the pine-scented woods. And as they went along, they heard, "Mr. Twink, wait, stop a minute." And so they stopped, but so did whoever was following them. "Come, Mr. Twink, let's walk again." But as they walked, they heard someone was following them. And this time, the small boy said in a frightened voice, "Oh, Mr. Twink, I'm scared. Can we go someplace else and hide?"
Oh, by my red-nosed relatives! Don't you feel safe with me? Just step over and look behind that tree.
And Mr. Twink stared at him so that the small boy did as he was told. And when he saw what was behind the tree, he burst out laughing for staring at them with a foolish little grin and on his homely face for having been discovered was the biggest, clumsiest brown bear the small boy had ever seen. And the boy clapped his hands in delight, wherefore the big bear stood up on his hind legs and placed one paw on the end of his nose and the other on the top of his head. And he began to sing and dance.
One paw is on my nose, and the other is on my head. I try very hard to dance, but I stumble around instead.
Oh, that's the life for me, Mr. Twink. There's nothing I'd like better than to dance like a bear.
There's no accounting for taste, I declare.
But
dance if you want to, like your big, clumsy bear.
well, after a while, they grew tired, and they were hungry too, from so much exercise. So the small boy said to the bear, "Gosh, Mr. Bear, I'm starving. Let's eat something." So the big bear dipped his huge paw into the brook and came up with a fish. And then he collected a small pile of nuts and some dark brown berries and sat down happily to eat. But the small boy looked up in great surprise and asked, "Oh, is that all you have to eat, Brown Bear? Raw fish and hard nuts and bitter berries?" But the bear just nodded his shaggy head and looked at the small boy sadly. Don't you even have any fresh bread or any chocolate cake or any little cookies with gumdrops on them? No. Oh. And then he sat down on the forest floor to think about such a strange thing. He thought, and and the birds began having such a merry time, chasing each other and swinging on the branches. That was the life for him. Oh, Mr. Twink, Mr. Twink, I don't want to be a bear anymore. Won't you please change me again?
No, I will not. Boys are too much trouble. For all I care, you can vanish like a bubble.
But, Mr. Twink, I didn't say I wanted to be a boy. I want to be a bird, like those up there.
Oh, all right, you can be a bird. But I mean it when I say, if it makes you unhappy, you'll have to stay that way.
And what a swell time the boy had being a bird. He flew and he sang and he trilled with joy. But when the sun began to lower behind the trees and all the forest creatures began to settle down for the night, then he thought of home. He was lonely, and he called down softly, "Oh, boy, Mr. Twink, where are you, Mr. Twink? Where are you? I don't want to cause you any trouble, but couldn't you manage to make me into a boy again?" But Mr. Twink just pulled his little acorn cap down over his ears and turned his back and pretended he hadn't heard. So the small boy tried again. I'll never ask to be anything else but a boy. Please, if you would just change me back into one." But Mr. Twink pulled his hat down further over his ears, further and further, until, well, he was practically inside it. "Oh, please, Mr. Twink."
"No, I will not."
Poor little bird. How could he ever be a small boy again without Mr. Twink's help? He tried his best to think real hard, but he was so tired and so hungry after his exciting afternoon that he just nestled against the tree trunk and was soon fast asleep. And then through the forest came the brook. The brook said, "He's such a small boy, Mr. Twink. He doesn't understand the ways of the forest yet." And the big brown bear said to him,
Well, if he were a boy, Mr. Twink, he could dance with me again. But everybody knows a bird can't dance with a bear."
And so even the bird sang so sadly like this. Mr. Twink was indeed touched. He gradually emerged from under his hat and said that he didn't want to be so hard-hearted. He just wanted to teach the small boy a lesson. And then he made the little bird back into a small boy again and took him home to his own doorstep without once waking him up. And as he turned to go, he said,
"Goodbye now, Button-Nose. Don't be sad, for the greatest joy you'll ever know is just to be a boy."
Once there was a boy, not a big boy, and not a middle-sized boy, but a small boy.